RuneScape is the life. RuneScape is the way. Forget all your problems, just skill until you're safe. Nothing really matters except for XP gains. We know the reason for life, and that's all those upgrades. Come chill by the fire, the Worth the podcast. Even if you're alone, we truly got your back. RuneScape. RuneScape.
Hello, my name is Liam, or in-game the Jigglyfat.
And I'm Sean, also known as Snowflake.
And we're coming at you with the second episode of the still not named RuneScape podcast that we're putting together. We luckily got to be together for this one. Sean has traveled to where I currently live. I'm not going to say that for privacy reasons, but we get to hang out for the next couple of weeks and, play a lot of RuneScape while sitting across from each other in the same room, 6 feet away.
Yeah, old school LAN party style.
Exactly. So we're just going to get right into it. We had a fairly productive week for the most part. I actually just finished off 85 defense at Nightmare Zone, which I was talking about trying to get to before moving on. And now I'm working on 78 Herb Lore to have the Herb Lore level for raids. And then hopefully, we're going to start learning raids soon, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It'll be enjoyable. I've done a couple of solo raids. They were really, really bad, really slow and low points, a lot of deaths, but I think it'll be fun to get back there with a group of people. So I've been working on, what did I do? I finished up Candor and Hard Diaries today, which is hilarious. My biggest barrier with that was that I'd never completed a round of Barbarian Assault, which we'll talk about in a second. And then other than that, just continuing with the T-Bow regrind. And that's actually going pretty smoothly. Doing a lot of Zulrah, doing a lot of Hydra, Brutal Blacks for AFK, and so I'm back up to the point where I have all my Zenites. I had sold my Berserker ring, and so I got that back and re-imbued it. And then I also did a little bit of Nightmare Zone in order to re-imbue it. And yeah, that's really the main things I've been up to lately.
Have you gotten lucky at Hydra at all? Get a claw? Not yet?
No, but I can't say anything. I got 2 claws, leather, a ring, and the pet before 500 KC. So I really can't. I really cannot complain about my Hydra
You deserve
luck.
the next 1K to be dry.
Exactly.
You've made all the fucking Iron Man in the world cry.
Yep.
So, as we kind of hinted at, one of the big things that we did this week was grind out Barbarian Assault for fighter torsos, because we have another friend who we want to start raiding with, and none of us have the money to support a BCP buy. So we decided, hell, if we can get 5 people together, Barbarian Assault's not the worst thing in the world. It just sucks when you have people leave at the last round. So we ended up getting 5 friends, and we spent about 4 hours getting it. It was there's quite a bit of bitching and complaining. I will not lie. It was, especially when we're switching roles, trying to explain to each other what each role was.
Oh yeah, it was basically everyone was fine, and then the defender was just getting shit on because they it's the hardest role to learn on the fly when you really don't know what you're doing.
I will say that I did actually, and by the end I was enjoying it. I feel like once we had the team cohesion that we needed, where we all knew what each role was doing and was supposed to do, and we could help each other out while also doing what we were supposed to do correctly, it made it. We finished the last one for your fighter torso in 20-ish minutes. It went really fast because we got those waves down pat. So I would not mind going back. I think probably Jake specifically would be a little bit. He doesn't want to spend any more time there.
He just doesn't. He's not interested in the diary, so there's not really a reason to. Yeah. And it's so funny because I've put Barbarian Assault off for so long. I bought BCP really early on in this account because I kind of just wanted to for the nostalgia of it. Yeah. And because of that, I've just never needed it. And now that I'm on the T-Bow rebuild, it's actually a useful item again for places like raids. and even some other things, miscellaneous things that I might want to be doing. But I always just was so, like, in my head, I'm like, this is just gonna suck, and I don't want to play with random people. But yeah, getting a group of friends together and just messing around and not really caring about the efficiency for the first couple of games, it made it really fun, I think.
Absolutely. So, guess kind of going a little bit more into that, like, we do plan on doing raids soon, which is probably gonna, especially once we get into them, gonna take up a decent chunk of the intros of these podcasts. Personally, I am really excited for them. This is what I've been working towards for the better part of a year, I would say, because I never got to, like, play WoW. I never had that experience of, like, getting into a dungeon with a group of people that, like, are interested in the game that I'm playing, and we go through and we have these chances at really, really good loot and that type of stuff, and just spending a few hours, like, going through that type of content. So raids is, like, going to be the first time that I get to do things in an MMO with my friends, and I just want to start immediately. Like, whenever we're all ready, I want to start learning. I don't care if we're not all set up for it once we start learning the each room and everything and the bosses and figure out how to do it well. Like, I'm ready for it. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be fun. It's funny because, as I mentioned, I did a couple of solo raids, and, you know, if your first experience with raids, specifically Chambers of Xeric, is trying to go in solo, it's freaking hard. It is, it is not easy to solo Chambers, and I think kind of because of that, like, every time raids is kind of mentioned, I'm like a little bit like gun shy, and I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be so hard. But no, I'm excited. I think it'll be a lot of fun to do it with a group of people, and I also, from what I understand, a bit more chill.
Yeah, it's not going to be nearly as difficult. I see it as, like, raids is difficult because, especially when you're learning, it's not just when I learned Zulrah, I died probably 20 times before I got my first kill, but each of those deaths were under 4 minutes, right? Where in raids, especially when you're learning, you're dedicating probably 2, maybe 3 hours just for a single KC, which is a lot, and it can be really taxing to, like, learn to do that. Obviously, I hope, especially with all of us together, it's going to make it a bit easier, and hopefully, because we do have kind of varying skill levels and varying gear, like, certain times your T-bow is going to come in clutch and make it a lot easier, stuff like that. So
I'll be carrying our head phases.
Yeah, I'm still excited to just, like, learn content with friends that can also make us a lot of money, which is going to be really cool, because this will probably be the way that I actually really increase my bank.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely the style of thing that I like more. Like, one of the things I like about a boss like Hydra, well, actually, Hydra's a bad example because it is really good, consistent money, and then it also has these chance at really expensive drops. But, like, there's something like DKs, where if you have the friendly elites and you're picking up the bones, you'll make a little bit of profit, but you're not making a ton. But then when you get those rings, it feels exciting. Really good, and it's exciting. And I do kind of like that, where that chance at a rare but expensive drop.
Yeah.
Over the more consistent money of something like Zulrah and Vorkath and Hydra.
I'm just calling it right now. Our first purple is 100% going to be Arcane Scroll. 100%.
I think that Mr. Dinsbulwark would like a word with you.
Honestly, I'd be happy with any purple. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Dude, I mean, yeah.
So we wanted to spend a little bit of time. We kind of breached on the topic last podcast, but we want to spend a little bit of time talking about our general play styles, because I really want to emphasize the fact that, like, the RuneScape is a game that can be played in many, many different ways and at many different skill levels, and most of the content is catered to the average player for the most part, and it's helpful, especially for people that are listening to this, to understand specifically what our perspective is. So I guess I'll start, since I started the topic. I would say that, like, I don't have any... I'm not, like, a very skilled player. I have not mastered prey flicking yet, but I am willing to take... Excuse me, had to choke a burp. I am willing to, to speed things up, I'm willing to pray flick Piety or Eagle Eye or something on Slayer tasks, and I'm fine with trying to get as perfect, like tick perfect as possible when doing construction training, because it is fun to get into that headspace of really being efficient and like doing things in the perfect way, quote unquote perfect way, I'll say. So when I like, especially looking at raids and stuff, I like the idea of, we're going in, we're going to be horrible at it, very inefficient, but part of the fun for me, especially like Zulrah is the main PVM content that I have as like experience. I've loved finding out those like small little minute details that can just, it's not even going to speed up your kill, but it's going to make the kills a little bit cleaner. Like, oh, you should actually stand on this tile, not the tile that was set in the guide, because this tile is slightly better for this reason or not, or really maximizing like exactly when to move to the next tile, when to switch my prayers, when to switch my gear, that type of stuff. It does really interest me, and I am nowhere near being able to do the Inferno, but part of what the Inferno like kind of excites me is the fact that it's built into the gameplay that you have to do these incredibly efficient game actions. You can't get away with missing a single prey flick because you might die. You can't get away with missing a single gear switch because that time matters so much in the long run. So I would definitely say that like I'm not an efficient player. I am usually AFKing or semi-AFKing. I like to watch videos, listen to podcasts when I'm playing, but I don't shy away from the more efficient and the more skill-intensive methods of playing.
Yeah. So I guess, like on my side, like I kind of mentioned last week, I am definitely getting to the late game, getting to the end game, 2100 total, got the Twisted Bow, and so we're definitely up there. I've been playing quite a lot, and I think for me, a lot of what I enjoy doing in the game is I want to say self-sufficient, but that's not quite it, because that makes me think a little bit more of Iron Man. But I do really like being able to be in situations where I can see my own skills grow, and so I tend to like doing things solo as much as possible. And so especially when it comes to bossing, that's why I jumped into Chambers and tried to learn it solo, was because in my head it was like that's just what I wanted to do. Get to the point where that's something I was able to do on my own. In terms of like content I enjoy, I obviously do quite a bit of PVM, but I also like just enjoying the breadth of gameplay that RuneScape really offers. It's like there are so many random things to do in this game and to go for. It's really I think that's one of the great things about the 07scape subreddit, is that you just get to see all these random achievements and goals that people have set for themselves that you may not have even known this piece of content existed.
Yeah.
And then someone just spends like 100 hours grinding something to get something you never even heard of, and you're just like, wow, that's actually kind of cool, like I might want to check that out. And so I think that's something I definitely look for in my own playstyle. I definitely look to what kind of some other players have done as sort of inspiration for some longer term goals I might want, which I think is something we can kind of maybe transition to, is what some of our goals are. And so kind of keeping in line with experience, that breadth of content, like one of my, I guess, longer term goals, or actually I would say moderately short term goals, because I'm really not that far off of it, it is the achievement cape. That's been something I've been chipping away at for a little while. I think I have 4 diaries left, and I think I have all the hards except the Wildy hard done. So I'm really looking forward to just banging that out, getting that achievement cape, and having like the full armor gear up and everything. I think that'll be fun. Additionally, one of my other kind of really random goals is I actually want to get all the graceful outfits, and so once I start grinding out agility a bit more, that's going to be one of the things I try and do on the way to 99, because I believe that I should, because I haven't bought really much amylase, so I should be able to easily get that before 99. And then other than that, I mean, more PVM, more raids, and I want to get back to the Inferno, because I was working on some attempts before I sold gear for the Twisted Bow, and now I'm really excited to actually try out my bow at the Inferno. So
it's going to make such a difference.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of my deaths have been kind of right at the beginning of the majors, waves with the majors, and so I haven't really gotten far enough to where it would make a huge difference yet, but I mean, even just, like, there's definitely been some situations where just the range of it would have been really nice to have.
Yeah, just tagging a creep that's really far away or something like that.
Yeah, making it so you don't have to run out from a pillar or something.
So, it's strange, because a lot of times I don't really play RuneScape with the idea of, like, super long-term goals in mind. Like, I'm not playing right now to max. I'm not playing right now to have a $1 billion bank to be able to buy a T-bow or anything, but when I think about it, there are definitely some things that I have made long-term goals. Like the Quest Cape was basically a 9-month process of me going in and out of RuneScape, and every single time I'd come back, I'd try and bang out like 10-15 more quests or something like that. So thinking about it, Achievement Diary is definitely one of the ones that I want to get, because I said I don't really think about maxing, because not only am I not super close to it, but I'm not sure if I'll ever really want to go for that, because it's kind of just there's a lot of content and skilling that I don't prefer, and I don't know if I'd be willing to put myself through hundreds of hours of it just to say that I did it. Whereas the Achievement Diary is kind of one of those cool things where it shows off, at least to me, it shows off the content that I am able to do, if that makes sense. However, not to say that I want to max, but I would really like to get my account to a point where, I would like to get my account to a point where anytime an update is released, I can partake in it. I can participate in it. Like the Darkmeyer update was the first time that an update came out that I was there on day one and completing it. Yeah. And that was just a master quest, so having a quest cape, it's not that difficult. But the next time they release a new PVM boss like Nightmare, I want to be able to be there and learning it with everyone else and experiencing it as a day one player. Right now, I have neither the skill levels nor the money to be able to do that, but that's one of the things that I really want to be able to, participate in, is just being able to be excited for new content, not just because, we're getting new content, but because I get to play that new content. So I think that'll basically be what I'm working towards, a max setup, or a best in slot setup for each style of combat, and then basically having a big enough bank, like maybe a 50 mil cash stack, that whenever something comes out, I'm most likely going to be able to at least buy a little bit of whatever is released, that type of stuff. Besides that, like, raids is really the main thing that I want to be able to do. Like, I feel like once I get into raids, that's going to be where I'm sitting for the better part of the next year or two, because that's what I'm really interested in. Maybe in the future, learning Theater of Blood, although that is a slightly, it's definitely different than Chambers because it's all combat focused, but I like that kind of team content. I think that RuneScape is unique in the MMO genre, in that the majority of the content is made to be able to do solo, and because of that, and because of efficiency reasons and just general ease of play reasons, like not having to get a group of people to dedicate 4 hours of their day to do something, most people do content solo. And I know in the past few weeks we've really been pushing, like, with our friends, like, we've been going on DK trips. We did the Barbarian Assault grind. Stuff like that is... Barbarian Assault, even if it's not exactly the most fun thing to do, I'm just happy that I'm doing stuff with friends, so...
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I think that definitely makes a huge difference, and that's been one of my bigger reservations, is I'm just not the type of person to really make friends in an online game.
Yeah.
And to some extent, you know, it's kind of funny that RuneScape is the game that I like because it is an MMO.
Yeah.
But I really don't focus a lot on the multiplayer aspect of it. I mean, I like seeing what the community does. I like seeing content that our community produces, and I like keeping up with, you know, discussions on Reddit and stuff. But I tend to just not, you know, I just, in my own playstyle, I tend to be pretty private, and I tend to just not do things with the players. But when it is people that I know, or at least I'm a little bit more familiar with, like through things like Discord, I definitely, I understand now why people enjoy doing things together in an MMO. You know, it's like, I get it.
It's fun.
It definitely is.
So yeah, like I think another thing, once I learn raids, like I think what will be really enjoyable to me, even though a lot of people might talk about how frustrating it is, but like doing just random free-for-all raids with people that I don't know, like that seems like now I actually have a reason to interact with other people in the game, as opposed to, you know, when you're training to 78 Herblore, there's literally no way for me to do that with anyone else in the game. But raids is one of those things where people are constantly, you know, on the raids worlds looking for people to get into their parties and that type of stuff. So that's definitely probably what the main goal of my account is, to get to that point where I can do all the new content. I'm proficient enough at the game, with my own skill, that I can not be a leech, and I can help out with whatever's doing and whatever's going on, and I can learn the content with everybody else. So
yeah.
So moving on to the next topic, I think, is there anything else that you want to say?
No, although I guess the one kind of goal that I do have that is more of a long-term goal / like continually ongoing goal is pet hunt. I have a list of some pets that I've picked out that I really want, and I actually recently got one. I got the mole pet, baby mole, at like $269 mole KC, and it's so funny because that's one that I honestly thought I would do like a couple hundred mole on my T-bow rebuild, and then like months or years later I would come back to mole to hunt for the pet. And so that was a really cool one to get early, and it was one on my wish list. I really want to keep grinding away at DKs and get some of those pets, if not all of them. Thermi would be a cool one to get.
Zulrah, of course.
Zulrah, I'm about halfway to drop rate, so that'd be a nice one to get as well. Vorky. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to just grinding out some more pets.
If that doesn't like perfectly, I guess, articulate the difference in our accounts, where like I'm just trying to get to the level of, you know, being able to do raids and stuff, and you're now looking for pets
from some of that higher level content. Yeah.
All right, so one of the big things that just happened in, I guess, RuneScape was the Darkmeyer update. A large part of the previous podcast was about that, and there's been quite a bit of controversy going on. Jagex has changed a lot of the XP rates and whatnot of the new agility and woodcutting methods that they released, that being the Hallowed Sepulchre and the Blisterwood Tree respectively. And a lot of people were very annoyed for... It seemed like a pretty 50-50 split, especially on Sepulchre, where I guess we'll start with that. A lot of people thought that it was too much XP, and a lot of people thought that it wasn't nearly enough XP. And when they changed it, they specifically said that they changed the rates to make it more in line with what was pulled, which is very understandable. But a lot of people thought like, oh, well, now that you nerfed it, it was already difficult content that most players are not going to play. Now that it's even worse than it was before, no one's going to play it. It's going to just be dead, basically on arrival, and that feels bad because it feels like a lot of the times when Jagex adds new things into the game, because of especially the more efficient-minded people in the community, if it's not better than everything else, then there's no reason to do it. Because, you know, I guess, for example, not to talk about the Blisterwood Tree yet, but if it's not breaking to tick woodcutting experience rates, then why would you ever do it? But you know, it's a whole conversation to talk about. What were your thoughts initially when the Hallowed Sepulchre changes, the initial ones happened when they nerfed the XP rates?
Yeah, so I think I was just surprised. You know, I think that was something that even some of the people who are maybe complaining about the XP rates didn't necessarily expect them to nerf it in the way that they did. Now, granted, it actually is a relatively small nerf, and especially from what test people have done, you know, it really doesn't seem like it's made too huge of a difference. That being said, I think that this change in particular, or I guess these fixes in particular really highlighted, and this is something that Jagex has come out and said, but it really highlighted the disparity in playstyles for Sepulchre, because you have the option to loot those coffins. The question is how many and which ones. And so if you're going through and only looting the final coffin, or only looting floor 5 coffins, like, yeah, no, like, obviously you're going to have much better XP rates than the people who are looting every single one, or looting, you know, all the later ones. And so then the question really becomes, how much of a penalty should we have for looting those things versus how much money should we be getting from it? And I think those are two kind of questions that we just don't really know yet, because we don't really know, you know, what the drop rates are, what the drop tables are. Like, I mean, we're starting to get those information already, you know, just like from the wiki and people collecting drop logs. But, you know, we don't really know what the average GP per hour, if, say, you loot floors 3, 4, 5 versus 2, 3, 4, 5. We just don't know these things yet, and because of that, it makes it really hard for Jagex to balance, say, like, we're gonna give back some of the XP to the lower levels, but now you have an issue where people are making, who knows, like 3 mil an hour and getting close to 80k agility XP an hour. Like, that's clearly not balanced.
Yeah.
But then again, Sepulchre is also very hard, and so we want, like, I do think that it is something that deserves a good reward, and I don't think that having both good XP and a bit of monetary gain is a bad thing. It's just, we have a very small data set right now, and I think that it's just hard for Jagex to balance it right now. And I think that the fact that they are actively trying to, but they're making relatively conservative changes, is what I think that's what they need to be doing. Like this week when they updated it, so now you get some agility XP when looting the coffins. I think that makes a lot of sense, because you're seeing that the main issue is that looting those coffins cuts your XP so much that, you know, people really aren't seeing anything close to what was pulled. And so hopefully this makes a bit of a difference, actually, you know, works towards addressing that.
I find, so I'm probably going to talk a little bit, because I've had a few thoughts that have popped into my head while you were talking. So first thing is, Hallowed Sepulchre is kind of the first time that we've seen this type of revamp of a skilling method released. Obviously, Brimhaven Agility Dungeon has existed for the majority of OSR's career, like, history. But this is the first time where they took something that was generally very passive and turned it into this incredibly active thing that, if you were good at it, made pretty good XP per hour. From what I have not mastered Sepulchre. I haven't done it actually since we last talked. But from what I saw, especially on Reddit, a lot of people were saying that if you were looting just floors 1 through 3... if you were just running through floors 1 through 3, not looting at all, and then leaving, you were getting over Artie's rooftop XP rates, which is supposed... Like, that's 90... what's it called? That's level 90 content for agility, you know? Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be the highest tier of agility experience rates that you can get in the game. And you could get that at level 72 in Hallowed Sepulchre. On the other hand, it's how do you balance loot to experience, you know? Because I feel like the reason that you do Hallowed Sepulchre is because you get more money in general if you are doing that looting. However, because people want to make money and also get experience gains, it makes this very difficult dichotomy. Like, if I'm going to be making more money doing rooftop agility, then there's no reason for me not to. But if I can make more money doing this except get less XP rates, then it has a reason to be in the game, you know? I have not really interacted with the Sepulchre at all, so I don't know exactly what that level was compared to rooftops, but I can imagine now that there's basically 3 things that they have to balance around the Sepulchre. First one being the difficulty of it, second one being the XP rates you get once you're good at it, and third being the amount of money that you get. It's not going to be an easy task, and I do agree. I think them being a little bit more conservative with how they're changing it makes a lot of sense to me, because this is one of those things that if they fuck up will really piss off a lot of people, especially people who do a lot of agility training, you know?
Oh yeah, like I mean, for example, you know, with this most recent change, like if they drastically add like a significant amount of XP to, say, looting the coffins, all of a sudden now it's I'm both making a lot of money and gaining way more XP than I need to, and so getting that value right is definitely really important. And I think Jagex definitely would like to err more on the side of we need to beef those numbers up a little bit rather than cut it back after people have already gained hundreds of thousands of agility agility XP
and hundreds of thousands of GP.
Yeah, and that too. I think one of the things that hasn't been talked about enough with the Sepulchre is it's an incredible piece of content. It is very out there. It is there just isn't anything like it in the game right now, and yeah. I really respect Jagex for doing that, and I do think that generally the design is fantastic. I'm very much on the side of, I think that people who are complaining week of release just we're not giving it enough of a chance. That being said, I think one of the main other issues with Sepulchre is once you start getting some lag or inconsistent ping, difficulty skyrockets. It just becomes insane, especially on those long runs with combinations of those darts and portals and eventually the flame walls if you get down to the 5th floor. Couple hundred milliseconds of lag spike or inconsistent ping, you're dead. And that's something that I really don't know. It's just something that I think is to some extent out of Jagex's hand. Like, it's like you can't balance content around that, but it does suck that it seems like this is going to be one of those things that if you are somewhere with bad internet or with high ping, this just might be relatively inaccessible content, and that sucks. It sucks when that happens. But otherwise, like, I think in terms of design, this was an incredible piece of content, and it sucks that there's so much controversy around it, because I think that really takes back from the fact that they've tried to do something different. And I think that to some extent, if they see such a mercurial response from the community over pieces of content like that, I think it really discourages people from taking these kinds of risks on new content.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up that I have not seen yet before, and this is not something that is even just it's not just relegated to RuneScape, it's relegated to all games in general, is the fact that we saw fairly close to a 50-50 break in the amount of people that were complaining that the XP rates were too high and the amount of people that were complaining that the XP rates were too low. Yeah. I think that is a very interesting, because normally the way that it works is, the 80-20 principle, like 20% of the people are going to make more, like the most amount of noise and that type of stuff. And generally, whenever Jagex does do these changes, especially to XP or GP rates, you're going to hear some amount of outcry from one side of the community, generally the community that is getting hurt by those by those changes.
Right.
In this case, it was both communities were coming out and saying, for the one community was saying this is unwarranted, it was not good enough experience, that they need to revert this, and the other side saying, yeah, this is good, it was way too good experience, this was a proper change. I find that incredibly interesting, because that, like I said, this is not something you normally see. There's normally only one group of people actually coming out and talking about it. So that almost signals to me that it was fairly balanced on its release. The fact that 50% of the people thought it was too good and 50% of the people thought it wasn't good enough, that tells me that there's probably, like, they kind of hit what they really wanted to release to some extent.
Yeah.
I think obviously you need to take into account GP per hour rates, because that's not something I've really seen talked about at all, because if you are getting lower XP rates but you're making a significant amount of money for that exchange, then yeah, I mean, if you want to make money doing agility, then you should, I don't want to say punish, but there should be a consequence for that. However, you know, if the XP rates actually were too low, even if you weren't trying to make money, that's a totally separate problem, but that's not what I saw. Like you said, I think a lot of the people that were complaining, especially about the XP rates being too low, had not interacted with the content that much, or had only played it in a very specific way. Yeah. And I think that if nothing else, this is going to bring about, like, very good change in general, because this is going to give Jagex a lot of insight into how they should balance content in the future, especially when XP and money is tied together. Because up until now, it's generally one or the other. You either make money or you make experience. This might be the first time where you're making experience and you're making money, and the trade-off is very equal, and now the players are the people that have to make that choice, as opposed to Jagex.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the one other piece that gets factored in there is just the fact that it is a piece of content that requires a lot of effort. And so I think that's kind of where there's some disagreement. You know, it's obviously much, much higher effort than Rooftops. And so, you know, we expect to see better XP from higher effort content. We expect to see better GP from higher effort content. But the issue, like you said, is when we now have both. You know, you are both making GP and getting XP, and being able to now balance those two on top of the fact that it is content with high effort.
I think another thing is, up until now, the majority of that high intensity skilling was, for no better way to say it, it was from abusing game mechanics. You know, 3-tick fishing, 2-tick woodcutting, that type of stuff.
Flicking.
That was not intended on release. That was something that the community figured out themselves. And so now if you try and compare it, like, you cannot compare a piece of content that was released by Jagex and meant to have a certain XP rate, and then compare it to another piece of content that the community has abused to get higher XP rates, you know? Like, sure, now at this point, Jagex has, for the most part, condones the fact that tick manipulation is a thing and allows it to be a thing, and they do kind of...
they're aware of it now, and they can actually plan for that in their content.
But I think people need to realize 3-tick granite mining was not the intended reason of granite existing, and you should not compare the extra XP rates of the higher intensity training to higher intensity training that Jagex releases vanilla, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think one of the things I respect the most about Jagex is that when it comes to things like tick manipulation and prayer flicking and things like that that are require quite a bit of effort but also do give you quite a bit of an advantage, is that they've been really welcoming of that generally. Like, I think they very well could have turned around and just said that's bug abuse and banned players that do those types of activities, but they recognize the fact that it opens up some interesting design space. It allows them a bit more flexibility, and they have to be careful because these things exist, but I think they recognize the fact that, you know, it makes people get more involved in the game because there's now a higher threshold of skill that you can try and achieve.
Yeah. And skilling, unfortunately, because it's not PVM, there's really no skill expression besides these, like, tick manipulation methods. Yeah. And when you see someone who can, perfectly 3-tick granite for 3 hours straight, that is, at least to me, that is fairly impressive. Like that takes an intense amount of click accuracy as well as focus to be able to do that type of stuff. So I'm not trying to like rag on tick manipulation methods when it comes to skilling. I'm more just saying that this is a really interesting thing because people are comparing a high intensity release that was meant to be high intensity with content that was not meant to be high intensity, but the community decided to make it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think this. I mean, I guess this can kind of tie into our next topic, which is the Blisterwood nerf.
Yes.
Because this was really interesting to be. I feel like on release, like there was a couple of people who were a little bit concerned about the amount of XP that you were getting from Blisterwood, but in general, the community seemed pretty quiet on it initially. Until Jagex made this nerf, and it was a pretty significant nerf. I want to say it was something like 76 XP per log down to 52 XP per log,
which is gonna drastically cut your XP.
Oh yeah, like that's like almost a 33% decrease, or 33% decrease. And that one's kind of interesting because I actually do think that Jagex's reasoning was pretty sound in that this was a piece of content that we didn't know we were getting. It kind of just showed up as part of the quest, and then it's like, oh, surprise, surprise, you can cut this after the quest.
Yeah, I didn't even realize you could cut it after the quest. I thought it was just like, you go to this room for the quest, and that's it, and then afterwards, you never go back.
Yeah, so, I think that, I think that they were very much justified in cutting the XP rates because you really don't want something that's good XP that wasn't voted for just randomly being in the game. I think that it's kind of unfortunate for them that it's one of the pieces of content that in Darkmeyer that seemed to have kind of the least controversy around it. Like there were, I think, a couple of people kind of saying like, oh, this might be a little too much XP. But overall, people are like, oh, this is just kind of a chill way until you get up to Redwoods, and if you want to AFK and not do 2 teaks or something. But yeah, I think that Jagex made the right move in nerfing it, but I would not at all be surprised if that gets pulled, if people do want it boosted again, because I don't think that it was broken. I just don't think that. I just think that Jagex was concerned about having a strong piece of content that was never voted on being added.
This is, so getting into the next topic being about pulled content versus unpulled content and how Jagex handles that. One of the big things that I saw specifically with the Hallowed Sepulchre nerfs is Jagex said they were nerfing it to what they had pulled. And so even though Jagex specifically said these are what the XP rates are going to be, and then they end up being higher and they nerf them back to what they're supposed to be, people are pissed off. I find that, like, as much as I might, I don't enjoy when content is done on arrival. However, as much as Jagex can fuck up, I do very much respect the fact that, like, they set up the polling system in the beginning, and they have been living by it up until now. And even when they fuck up with the XP rates or the GP rates or anything like that, they will wind it back to whatever was pulled. So I think it's right by them in the end for the Sepulchre nerf, because if it was better than what the community specifically said they were okay with, then it should not be that, it should not stay that way. If we want it to be better in the future, we can vote on that. That's the awesome thing about old school RuneScape, is we get to change the content as we please. That's the incredibly unique thing about OSRs, is that we get to have a say in how content is released and what content is released. So I think in general the fact that they were willing to nerf these two new skilling the word is escaping me, but these two skilling methods, because they felt that they had not lived up to their standard of following the polling. I think that shows a lot of character on Jagex's part. Like, even if they're going to get a lot of backlash for it, they still want to make sure that they're listening specifically to what we tell them is okay to be added to this game.
Yeah, and again, with the Sepulchre, they admitted that part of the reason their calculations were a bit off was that, their assumptions of what people were going to be doing didn't quite match up with what people were actually doing. And I think that's I think that's awesome that they recognize that, because that's something that I think would have kind of been easy for them to say, listen, guys, if you play it how we expected you to play it, your XP rates would be fine. Stop bitching, They could have done that, but they're not. They're saying, listen, we understand that we're now kind of seeing two pretty distinct playstyles for this new piece of content emerge, and we're going to try and keep balancing both of those. We're going to try and reduce overall XP, but improve XP for people who are maybe looting a bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they and like you said, I think that they're staying true to the polling system. And again, with the Blisterwood, I think that's, it wasn't a piece of content we were expecting. It wasn't necessarily problematic, but we should have some say about whether or not we want this to be a new, AFK, chill, but still decent XP method for woodcutting.
See, just look at the last time they added something without pulling at was it Vasa's longsword?
Vesta's
Vesta, yeah. The amount of outcry around that, because they didn't pull it. We didn't get a choice. And Blisterwood was added, and we were just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And the fact that, there's obviously there's major differences in both of those pieces.
Vesta's longsword had histories of in a lot of people's eyes of being overpowered and being this PvP weapon that was just not fun to play against. And obviously I'm not a PvPer. You aren't either, but it kind of seems like that discussion has really died down. It seems like Vesta's longsword hasn't really been as much of an issue as people were expecting.
Yeah, I've not seen any posts on Reddit about it since they decided to add it, basically.
But you're right. I do think that the community was definitely justified in being upset that Jagex did deviate from their poll system.
So yeah, at the end of the day, it begs the question: why weren't people pissed off that the Blisterwood tree was added without pulling as well? They're just pissed off that it's not as good as it should have been, even though there was no shoulda, because they never even told us that it was going to be in the game. It just ended up being there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So kind of switching gears a little bit from the skilling side of things. Unfortunately, another kind of clan-based PKing controversy is starting to rear its ugly head. I'm not sure how many people know about this, but there is a way that you can pay clans basically to protect you in Revenant Caves. So if anyone for some reason does not know what Revenant Caves are, they're these monster types that were added 2 years ago or something, maybe a year and a half. And the entire idea was that they have these chance at incredibly expensive drops, whether that be certain totems or I remember in the original there was the 100 dragon plate legs drop. Oh my god, yeah,
the 100 times drop, noted drops of dragon plate legs, rune plate legs, just different items. It was. They're a group of monsters that have access to a really lucrative loot table, both in terms of kind of their normal drops and then in terms of these mega rare different emblems and wilderness weapons and stuff.
And so the way that that incredibly high GP per hour rate was supposed to be gated is that you do have to go into deep wildy to actually kill these monsters. That I think the lowest level you can get to is just on that 30 mark where glories still work.
Yeah, if you're kind of at the very south end of the Revenant Cave, you can use a level 30 tele, either glory or seed pod, to get out. But once you get above that, you can't, obviously, and the whole cave is multi. So what's been going on is it's been known for a very long time that
quite a few of the different PK clans have locked down a lot of different worlds, and basically they have clan members always just sitting in those worlds waiting for PKers to come in, and while their PVM clan members are killing the Revenants and making the clan money, the PK clan members are waiting and protecting them, so anyone who tries to attack them gets basically one shot instantly. And a big thing, especially popularized by Mr. No Sleep's video, where he paid for protection by a clan, which is a service that they actually do offer. He basically got to go and kill Revenants in the Revenant caves without having to worry about PKers for like 10 plus hours. He basically was able to just, if any PKers came in, the clan that he paid was able to would just protect him, would kill the PKers first. And this is now starting to gain a little bit of traction in the community about how kind of, I don't want to say messed up, but it's definitely an abuse of the system. I mean, the idea that a clan can control a single world's Revenant caves and let their clan members farm it for free for hours and hours and hours on end means that there's all this GP coming into the game that wasn't really meant to come into the game. You know, it was supposed to be this high risk, high reward. You know, you get that 100 times Dragon Plate Legs drop and you run and quickly try and telly, but now it's, oh well, I literally have 50 different clan members around me. I can kill these Revenants as much as I want and no one's ever going to kill me.
Yeah, now I think some important things to kind of mention are that obviously Mr. No Sleep didn't pioneer this, or like the plan that he was he ended up buying protection from didn't pioneer this.
It was a service that was offered before then. He just happened to stumble upon it.
Exactly, yeah. And you know, it did. I think what his video really did is kind of just highlight how much money Revenants can be if you just aren't getting PK'd all the time. You know, obviously, you know, and I'm sure anyone who's done Rev protections can say it's not 100%. You know, another clan can come in and kind of sweep people, and you get caught up in that. Or you might get, you know, you just might get unlucky and something happens, you get targeted by a PKer and you die. But, you know, it makes it to the point where it's like, you know, you can skull up and get those better drop rates on the wilderness weapons without really worrying about losing that much gear. Or if you do lose one set, you know, you might only lose one set in a day. You know, like, it really just distorts how much money those the Revenants are able to make, and more to the point, I think it's entirely against the spirit of the wilderness. Like, it's just like, it just doesn't match this idea of, like, there's, like, you know, here's this area where anyone might kill you and you gotta be afraid. You know, it's like, no, just pay this group a bunch of money and you're fine. Like, it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't match the flavor of the game. I don't really feel like I'm happy with how I'm describing this, but I do mean it when I say, like, this is just, like, an abuse of the way that clans and multi-combat areas in the wilderness were meant to work, in my opinion.
I guess I do for the most part agree with you. To play devil's advocate, would you be against, you know, let's say, so our group, right? We had 5 people in Barbarian Assault, right? What if I decided to go to Revenants and the 4 of you decided to try and protect me at Revenants? Would that be an abuse of that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see your point there, where, you know, if you just have a small group of people, it's obviously not 100%. You can end up with, you know, against another small group of people, and they'd have pretty even odds. I think I think the issue is just that, you know, there is no way for Jagex to combat clans. What are they gonna do? Like, break up clan chats, change multi-areas? Like, we already know that doesn't work. There's single, you know, like, you can still get around things in PJ and singles. You can still, you know, use other chat services and, like, Discord and Wilderness Team Capes to distinguish your clan members. Like, there's so many ways to just, that clans can still exist, that I don't really know how you deal with the fact that these large clans are just totally different than a group of 5 friends, or even a group of 15 friends. That's totally different than 100-member plus PKing clan. Now, I'm not saying that when you go to Revenant Protection, you're always surrounded by 100 people, but obviously, when you have these really large clans, it's more likely that at any given time, there's going to be a significant number that are able to hop on and give you the protection you need. And that's just it's just not something that feels like it was ever meant to be in the game. It was ever in the spirit of the wilderness, PKing, even for clans. It just doesn't really feel like it matches what this game was kind of meant to be, which is just sitting around while other players fight for you and just gold farming. It's just
especially when you look at the intended purpose of Revenants, which was Revenants were added in part to the revitalization of the Wildy, which they wanted to make PKing be something that wasn't just, you're not just killing clue hunters and getting a spade from it, the meme. The entire point was now there's this area where when you kill someone, there's a chance you're going to make 2-3 mil from it. And the fact that clans are literally locking down an entire area and just making all this money with basically zero risk, it does kind of feel against what the entire point of Revenants was.
Yeah, and it's funny because I almost didn't even have an issue when kind of earlier on in Revenant Caves you would see kind of people complaining about clans coming in and kind of clearing out the place, because that was very different. It was the kind of thing where it's that's part of the risk that you were accepting when you went to go kill Revenants, is that I might die. A clan comes through, wipes the place, but if you wait 15 minutes or if you hop a couple worlds, you can just go right back and get back to what you were doing. And and so it's oh no, I suffered the consequences of being in the wilderness, but I'm not unable to do what I wanted to do. But now it's really getting to the point where so many worlds are getting locked down and you're being forced to pay these clans that it's you can't even play it, quote unquote, legitimately. And I think that's the big issue. It'd be one thing if this was kind of a relatively minor side and a relatively it wasn't having a significant impact on gold coming into the game. It wasn't having a significant impact on players' access to Revenants, but it is. It's making it totally inaccessible to single players. It's making it totally inaccessible to small groups of players. It's making it to where it's a lot of hotspots in the wilderness where clans make it to the point where you have to really distort your play style, distort maybe the time that you play, worlds that you play on in order to do it.
I mean, to go even beyond just the way that it affects the gameplay in the wilderness, there was a post on Reddit today how one of the clans had a couple of player mods, and every single time he tried to go in and compete with the clans for their space, they would just start muting him and stuff. That's obviously an abuse of power, but it really shows just how much influence these clans do have on, especially in the Wildy, when it comes to new content, how much influence they can have, and the fact that there are these players that are even modded by Jagex and can do that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think that might be an interesting topic for the future, because I honestly, the whole player mod concept has never made a ton of sense to me. I've never really understood just taking random people from the community and giving them even a relatively small amount of power over other players. It just seems like a recipe to end up in some kind of sketchy situations. But yeah, you're right. Now there's definitely more and more of these kind of allegations of PMods who happen to be in clans, and then whether or not they're then abusing their power to benefit these clans, or not even necessarily, not always necessarily to benefit, but just to rag other people, and not at all what Jagex intended player mods to do. They're supposed to be kind of the beacons of the community, these role models, and these kind of positive influences on other players.
I think, I don't know if you exactly remember, but a lot of the clans locking down worlds came out back when the Jagex employee Jad was fired for hacking into accounts and whatnot, and
Right.
working with Rot, and it was actually a gigantic discovery that if you go and kill revenants while you're Scold, you have a higher chance for getting the very rare drops. And
Right,
stuff.
I believe Ash actually randomly dropped that in a tweet, and it was like kind of this big shocker, you know, like if I'm remembering correctly, you know, it was kind of like the community kind of came back and like, wait, what do you mean? Like why is this like this is weird, you know, like we didn't really understand what was going on.
And it wasn't like just a small chance. Like from what I remember reading the different rates is like if you were Scold when killing revenants, you had basically like a 33% higher chance of getting like a crossbow or a Vigora's chain mace.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty huge difference, and think about what that means for Rev's content as intended. It means that you have these random people in there who are Scold and who are risking potentially quite a lot of money. You know, that sounds pretty good for the wilderness. You know, in terms of PKing, where it's like if you want to do that, you got to be prepared to fight.
Yeah.
But then clans kind of usurp that whole thing where it's like, well, if I can just have a couple PVM clan members Scald while the rest of my clan protects them, I'm not really, like, no one's really risking that much. And
you're making so much money.
You're making so much money. And then it's like, even if, you know, another clan comes in and wipes your guys, like, you know, the fact that you've been able to do that for 20 hours means that, you know, you've already made the money.
Yeah, exactly. It's, I don't know if I'm in the position to give any sort of answers. I feel like, especially since we are, like, trying to become some amount of, like, a part of the community discussion, we should probably provide answers. But I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard because, again, like, I'm very willing to admit that this is my perspective as not a PKer and not a PvPer, and so I understand that my perception of this might be a little bit off, and I'm sure that there are some people who maybe are PKers, and might even be in clans that would have, you know, certainly a different perspective, but this just really doesn't seem like it was ever intended to be part of the game, and I don't know. I've always felt like Rev Caves didn't really seem like the right way to try and revamp the wilderness, and I think that's always, I think that's kind of the argument that you see a lot is we don't want people to, like, adding more non-PvP content to the wilderness doesn't encourage people to participate in PvP.
Yeah.
It encourages non-PvPers to go into the wilderness and then be upset when they die to PvPers. And I don't think that that's fair to non-PvPers, and I don't think that that's fair to PvPers, because, you know, PvPers get content shot down all the time, and a large part of that is that people who are not interested in that content don't want to be forced to participate in that content because of something added to the wilderness by Jagex. And I think overall, like, they've done a pretty good job of making it so there's not anything really super critical in the wilderness that you absolutely need to go and get, but there are a lot of small things, you know, like the god capes, like the wilderness diaries,
dragon pickaxe.
Pickaxe.
If we're talking about Iron Man, like, there is actually content in the wilderness that is, like you said, it's not completely mandatory, but if you're trying to get to endgame Iron Man content, you want a Mage Arena 2 God Cape, you want a Dragon Pickaxe. Those are very, very significant upgrades.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't mind having a couple of those things in the wilderness where you have a little bit of risk while you're trying to do those small pieces of content. But we really don't need any more of it, you know. Yeah. We don't need a Rev Caves V2 where, or you know, even necessarily more Wildy bosses where all that's encouraging is people who don't want to PK going into the wilderness and then being upset when they get PK'd.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not going to help anything, and it's not going to make PvP any better.
So again, shifting gears kind of abruptly, because last time we ended on a lot of talking about clans and the toxicity that breeds within them. So firstly, I want to talk about a change that was added kind of subtly, the fact that the what's it called, Partner Slayer was removed from RuneScape, which has been this really, really obscure, weird content where basically you and a friend could decide to kill the same Slayer monster at the same time. And from what I understood, you basically got half the amount of experience from it. But the fact that a lot of very specially made accounts, mainly the level 3 99 Slayer accounts, were made using this method. It's kind of an interesting... I understand you were saying before why they actually removed it, because there's some amount of abuse with being able to request a partnership with someone.
Yeah, I don't understand exactly how it all works, but there was some manipulation with the actual process of getting a Slayer partner that was leading to manipulation and abuse of some kind. I don't fully understand if it was like harassing players or if it was being used to do some certain things in content, like interface stalling or something, or maybe some combination of both depending on the context. But there was some manipulation with the way that actually like requesting a partner or actually, you know, getting into Partner Slayer works that Jagex deemed was, you know, worthy of a removal. You know, it's interesting because you're right, it is a very obscure piece of content, and I don't think a lot of people will ever really care, but you know, it does suck when you kind of have these methods that allow people to be really creative in their accounts that then get either patched or removed. And, you know, what's Jagex's obligation to people who want to play the game a bit differently, but still within the realms of the game?
Yeah. The other method that was patched out, I'm completely blanking on, but there was another method that was patched out where it was like something that, you know, if you didn't get it by the time they patched it out, it was not obtainable anymore. Oh, it was Darkbow. That's what it was. When Darkbow was in the Catacombs of Korend, you could have an account that had not completed Morning's End Part 2, which meant it could be a pure, and you would have a Darkbow, and that was kind of like a big deal. So now there's, you know, only a handful of accounts that actually have a Darkbow on a pure and whatnot. And I'm not going to fault Jagex for this, because if people are abusing it, especially for malicious intent and like trying to ruin other people's experiences and potentially even, you know, get money from them, then yeah, absolutely it should be removed. But it is just, it's kind of like a sad reflection on like the fact that, like, at least for now, if you're going for 99 Slayer on a level 3, that might not exactly be possible in the same way that it was before. So to end on slightly I guess happier news, a fantastic achievement was just made in the community.
Oh, yeah?
Exact, he got a level 40 Inferno cape, which is absolutely mind-blowing.
Absolutely disgusting.
We watched the video right before recording this, and it like, the amount of skill that it takes to do this cannot be, like, overstated for the most part. Bodhi, about 2 or 3 months ago, I want to say, put out a call and saying anyone who could beat Exact's level 46 combat cape was going to get 10k, and if no one could beat it, then he was going to give Exact 5k. And then Exact comes out just completely out of the blue with a level 40 Inferno cape. Like, I have not experienced Inferno at all, so you should probably speak on it a little bit more, because you understand exactly how difficult that is. But like,
it really is one of those things that it's like, you know, even really skilled players who are comfortable doing, you know, endgame content, you know, like Chambers of Xeric, like Theater of Blood, might have a really, really hard time doing Inferno.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it is a beautiful piece of content that is, I think, exactly as hard as Jagex intended it to be. And the way that people have been able to go from first only being able to do it in absolute best-in-slot gear to being able to do it with welfare gear, to being able to do it on pures, and now these ridiculous low-level counts. I love this stuff. You know, this is always the aspects of our community and this game that I really enjoy. And it's just insane, you know. I mean, you know, more or less he did, I believe, you know, he essentially did a no pillar from I want to say around wave 55.
Yep.
Was when the pillars went down. And if anyone has, you know, watched any no pillar stuff, you know, like, that's just, it's so much focus for such a long period of time.
All the prey flicking that you have to do.
Yeah, and it's really quite insane. And to do it on such a low level account where you can't even tank, you know, one hit realistically, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, like, I mean, it's just one of the coolest things to watch. Someone who's that talented achieve something that high level.
It really, like, I was talking a little bit before about how, you know, there's a lot of methods of skilling that were not intended but now have become a part of the community. And honestly, RuneScape is one of, for that reason, it's a beautiful game. The fact that Jagex embraces these incredibly, like, out of left field, unintended ways of playing the game, and they allow it because they understand the amount of skill that it takes. They understand the amount of focus that it takes. They understand that it's basically people. You know, they're not trying to break the game. They're trying to, like, embrace the game to its fullest. They're finding every single little bit of manipulation and, you know, any single
strategy.
Strategy or advantage that they can get, and they're using it to the fullest. And Exact is a perfect example of someone, especially with his level 3 fire cape, like, showing just how far you can push the mechanics of this game that most people, when they see, they call boring. It's only boring if you make it boring. If you want to push it to the absolute extreme, it becomes this incredible game that has so much depth to it that I would argue it rivals a lot of other games on the market right now. Because, you know, obviously, you know, prey flicking and stuff was not exactly intended, but now that it's a part of the game, it's incredible that the lengths that people will go to show just how good you can be.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about this earlier with Chambers of Xeric, where you know, the vast majority of strategies to solo it were never intended, especially when it comes to Ulm. You were never intended to be able to, like, skip attacks in the way that you are, and to be able to do things like 4-1 or 4-0, or, you know, all these really complicated ways of running Ulm's head and stuff, and knowing where you are in the attack cycle in order to maximize your DPS while minimizing damage so that you could actually solo it. Like, that wasn't intended.
If nothing better, like, Theater of Blood was made as content that was not supposed to be soloable. It was supposed to be done at least with another person because of just how difficult a lot of the mechanics were. And then, you know, we have Wooks coming out within, you know, how long, just soloing it like a fucking boss, and everyone else who has followed him. I don't know how many people have soloed it, but the fact that I think I really appreciate that Jagex embraces the fact that people are able to know that much about the game and play the game at that level to be able to do those types of things, as opposed to shutting them down because they're abusing bugs. If you could
I mean, another really recent example with Chambers of Xeric is challenge the new rope skip with you do it, I think, primarily on World 365 because it's the high risk world, and that allows you to interface stall with the protect from item prayer, and in combination with the Phoenix necklace allows you to rope skip in the tightrope room a lot more consistently, and that's huge for speedrunning, you know, and that's, you know, it's something where it makes it so much less RNG. You don't have to worry about, you know, basically, going full tank gear praying up to 121 hit points and
Yeah.
still dying. You know, that's very easily something that Jagex could have shut down and said, we're not gonna like cater to this small random group of people manipulating something that wasn't that we didn't expect to begin with. They said, you know what, no, this isn't hurting anything, it's not introducing absurd amounts of Chambers of Xeric drops into the game for no reason. It's just a slight efficiency things that the people who are trying to push it to its absolute maximum have found to try and get that slight little edge.
And really, that's... If you've been in the RuneScape community for any amount of time, you realize, like, that's what this game's all about. You can play it however you want, but the people that are pushing that edge, finding those new methods of training or PVMing and stuff, and making content that was not supposed to be done a certain way, doable a certain way,
right?
That is, like... That is the lifeblood of this community. The fact that, like, yeah, Jagex will release certain things into the game, and people will master that content. This is a game that is not meant to just, you know, you don't play anything that's released for 5 hours and then get mastered at it. You have to play it for hundreds of hours before you have every single tick dialed down to the exact moment that you want it to be. And I think that it really shows off amazing game design, that this game can be pushed to a limit that a lot of games don't even, you know, get close to achieving.
Yeah, and you know, especially when you look at the fact that it is 20 years of spaghetti code, you know, of course these random weird things are going to exist, and you know, some of them are going to be legitimate bugs that Jagex needs to fix, but a lot of them are just kind of these random unintended things. They require a lot of dedication, a lot of observation, and a lot of theory crafting, and to do something that's really, really cool but not game breaking. And that's I'm glad that Jagex recognizes that and seems to be supportive of that.
So I mean, to go back, shout out to Exact. He is probably one of the best PVMers in the game right now, especially when it comes to like Inferno and Fire Cape runs. He has made gigantic waves in the community and really showed the lengths that this game can be pushed, and he deserves, you know, a spot somewhere in RuneScape to show just how much he's added to this community.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I you know, it's funny, I almost wouldn't be surprised if someone beat this record, but at the same time, like, I also think there's a very good chance that no one except Exact will.
Yeah, he is just that good. I mean, you can say that Wooks is the overall best player in the game at any given moment just because of his game knowledge, but in terms of actual mechanical skill, there are quite a few players that are just incredible to watch, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Bodhi is anything special to look at, but we were watching his prey flicking in the Inferno on one of his accounts, and just how fast he was going, and knowing that, like, there are people significantly better than him in the community. Like, that's awesome to think about.
Yeah. And, I mean, granted, I actually, like, I have a lot of respect for Bodhi. He's an incredibly talented player. But I kind of know what you mean, where it's like there's this kind of almost, I guess, mythos around him.
Yeah.
Because he has been such a large presence in the community for so long, that I think that it is kind of easy to forget that he is he's still a very, very, very talented player.
Yeah, everyone thinks of him as
and then also the fact that there are other players that are as equal, if not even better, and that's crazy. You know, it's really crazy.
Absolutely. I think that's probably. I don't have any more topics to talk about. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
No, I think that's about it. You know, other than excited to keep on keeping on and hopefully get to raids sometime fairly soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping by... I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but within the next few weeks, like, it would be awesome if we could start learning. Or, like, I understand that you want to get like good gear and shit.
I'm just being a holdout. You guys want to do it in some scuff gear, and I'm like, no, I want to get some good gear.
You know, I would not mind if you only had a BGS. You don't have to get the Dragon Warhammer. It's fine. It's all good.
I think we'll want at least one Dragon Warhammer.
I'm sure, but I've never done raids, and all I want to do is raids. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was. I'm going to call that a podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is a little bit shorter than the last one. There's no major updates to talk about, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks we can record another one. I released the last podcast very late compared to when we recorded it because there's a lot of like extra stuff. I wanted to get a theme song, which we'll probably re-record at some point because it
sounds beautiful.
It's a fantastic for as exactly as cringy as an OSRS podcast should be. I do want to just tighten the bolts a little bit.
You gotta polish the turd a little.
Exactly. We also need to figure out an actual name for this thing.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I still vote for Neve Simps, but that's just
Neve Simps.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
We'll discuss it afterwards. But yeah, thank you all for listening. This is the Jiggly Fat.
Snowflake.
And yeah, we'll hopefully see you on the next episode.